Prescribed Truth started with the idea of wanting to help people defend their faith against all these crazy and wacky objections out there. I want to share with you 3 ways that I go about doing this. We're going to talk about that next.
Ephesians chapter 4 verse 25. Therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth, each one of you with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. For his name's sake, prescribe truth, we giving you what the doctor ordered. Jamal Bandy, apologist, the Lord's servant. We undeserving, but Christ changed our mind frame. In a world full of errors, the only thing the doctor prescribes is truth.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Prescribed Truth podcast right here on YouTube at youtube.com/prescribe truth. If you're watching this on YouTube, please remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell in case you haven't already. The podcast is available on Apple iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Castbox, and what have you. So I really appreciate that. If you want to contact me, you can do so by emailing me at prescribe.truth@gmail.com or calling me at 801-980-6333. All right, if you want to support the show financially, you could do so by partnering with me on Patreon at patreon.com/prescribe truth. I have different award tiers starting anywhere from $1 and up. This is what I'm talking about here. $20 and up patrons get a t-shirt. I have different designs. You can choose from either one of them. It's up to you. I greatly appreciate it. Man, y'all don't know. Y'all work hard for your money, and this costs money, and so I will be asking for help. But man, I appreciate your prayers, because either way, by God's grace, this will continue. And so even if I gotta cut off some connections here and there, I still want to record content. It's free to record content on YouTube. What costs is to, going on different podcast apps and all that stuff and make things easier, and then the equipment costs, so on and so forth, to make it sound good and everything else. So I appreciate you guys' support. Thank you so much. So yeah, that's that. What are we going to be talking about today? I want to deal with how I go about defending the faith. So there's a method that I use every single time. I don't change. I don't deviate. And it always works. Always. Now, I'm not saying this works as into it makes a person bow down on their knees to what I'm saying and automatically agree with me. No. What I'm saying is that the method of way I go about giving my argument or answering objections leads the conversation in a way where it could be beneficial. Whereas I'm not trying to attack the individual. I'm not trying to put my foot on their neck and say, hey, I'm dominant. I just want to engage. But how we go about engaging and how we make sure the conversation is beneficial to both parties, even if we disagree, is these simple things. And that's what I want to share with you. So, the very first thing is you got to have your foundation. Where are you going to stand? Now, I heard James White say that, what you win people with is what you win them to. And so I always like to start with the foundation of God. That's it. And if you're a Christian, and if you're talking about defending your faith, I hope you're starting with that. But the reason why that's something that has to be said is because a lot of people don't start with the foundation of God, even though they profess to be Christian. How they start is based on emotions, what grandma taught me, what I experienced in my life, and so on and so forth. And these are the things that they use to defend their faith instead of starting with God. The foundation has to be sure. If it's done based off of your experience or what grandmama taught you or whatever case may be, that's subjective. Grandma taught you one thing, somebody else's grandmama taught them something else. What makes your grandmother right and theirs wrong? You see what I'm saying? It's subjective reasoning. And so I want to start with God. Now, here we have to do something called presuppositional apologetics. Now, for those of you who don't know these terms, I'm going to explain them briefly, and you can look them up and check them out for yourself. But you have presuppositional apologetics and you have evidentiary apologetics. I use a little bit of both. I love the evidence that's out there for the Christian faith. I love it. Oh man. Every time something else new comes, it just makes me fill up with joy knowing how God protected his truth for the world. I mean, and those who are blind won't see, but those whose eyes are open are rejoiced. And so I love evidence, but I always begin presuppositionally. And what that means is that you begin with something that's already assumed to be true. All right. So, for instance, I presuppose that God exists. That's the only thing that makes sense. Nothing else does. Apart from God, nothing else makes sense. That's where I start. If God doesn't exist, we can't account for logic, can't account for reason, love, morality, any of that. We can't account for it if God doesn't exist. If he doesn't exist, then all of that is subjective. It's just your opinion. And so, if God does exist, well, he's outside of us, and therefore everything is based off his standard and not our own. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. So that's how I start. So you have a foundation, a sure foundation, a clear foundation for where you're going to start. My suggestion, you start with God in answering any objection. Why is the Bible reliable? Start with God. Everything begins with God. Everything. So we presupposing God exists. All right. Now, the next thing, I like to stay on topic. I like to stay focused on one thing. And I'm very narrow-minded when it comes to this. I don't like to deviate. I don't like to go down rabbit trails. I don't. I'll be quick to stop, and I won't go no further until we deal with the stuff that's at hand. I'll give you a prime example of what I mean. I was having a conversation with an individual on Facebook, dealing with the comments, and I forgot how we got to this conversation. But he was trying to deny Christianity. And he was saying how Jesus was basically, what we were worshiping concerning Jesus was wrong. That Jesus was really, and this is going to sound kind of crazy to you, but prepare yourself, that Jesus was a Mexican born in Africa. Okay? Scripture says he's born in Bethlehem. There appears to be an African country called Bethlehem. So that's what he said. Now, I asked him simply, that was his first objection. That was his argument to me. And I said, where's the evidence for that? Can you give me proof that Jesus was a Mexican born in Africa? And he changed and he said, well, what about what the Bible talks about condoning slavery and condoning rape? And I said, no. Give me evidence about Jesus being a Mexican born in Africa. You give me evidence for that, we can move on to the next thing. You brought this up, so I'm challenging you on it. Deal with it. Until you deal with it, I ain't answering nothing else. Now, you may think that's stubborn of me, but this is why I do it. I always challenge people to deal honestly because that's how they want Christians to do. They want Christians to be honest about the information that we have. And therefore, I want people to be honest about the objections that they bring. So be honest. Deal honestly. If you're going to bring up an objection, let's deal with it. But then when you get caught into a corner, don't jump. either admit, that's being honest, either admit I don't have evidence for that. I'm just saying what somebody told me. This is what I heard. Whoop de whoop. Let that be the case. Be honest, and then we can move on. But see, I'm not gonna be like, aha, see, you foolish human being. I'm not gonna be that way. I just want you to be honest. So if you don't have proof of Jesus being a Mexican in Africa, then say so. And so this individual continued, but what about this and what about that? And I'm like, no, give me evidence for Jesus being a Mexican born in Africa. Eventually, it took forever, but eventually he came on and said, okay, I don't have evidence that Jesus was Mexican born in Africa. I take that back. I said, well, cool. Thank you. Now we can move forward. Now, on the subject of rape. And that's where we went. And so, and I gave him scripture for that. Then instead of dealing with that, he tried to jump to something else. Then I went back to it. I said, no, I gave you an answer concerning the scriptures concerning rape. Do you see that? Do you not? What's up? You know, eventually, he owned it. He said, okay, I see that. I take that back. And that's how I go. And that's how I do. It's very frustrating to those on the other end. I understand. But this is how you do honest dialogue. You know, I don't want to deal dishonestly with you. I don't want you to deal dishonestly with me. My goal is not so I can be more intellectually superior than you. I want us to have a conversation about something very serious. Your soul is important and truth matters. I mean, there is a true God who's going to judge the world. And those who are not found in him will spend an eternity in hell. That is true. And therefore, my goal is not to make myself look better than you. I want to have an honest discussion. You see? And so this is the method that I use. And it hasn't failed me yet. Now, like I said, that doesn't mean that everybody does like this gentleman do and admit that they don't have any evidence. You know, some people will keep arguing the point until eventually I realize that this conversation is going to be very unfruitful and it's not going to do anything but cause me to go in my flesh and it's not going to be beneficial to the hearers. So you got to learn when to back off. And that's that. So the one thing is having your foundation. The next thing, stay on topic. Don't allow yourself to get drawn down these rabbit trails that have no end. It won't work. And you'll be exhausted. All right? The next point that I bring up to you is study. Study. Study this Bible. Study the Bible. Know what it teaches. Know what it's saying from beginning to the end. Now, I'm not saying that you have to know the fullness of everything that's in the scriptures in order to be able to give an answer to some objections. But I will tell you, a lot of the things that people have objections to, you need to have a well-rounded understanding of the scriptures in order to give an answer. You do. You know, and your theological stance means something when giving answers to people. I mean, concerning God's sovereignty, concerning salvation, and how that come about, the nature of man, all of that makes a difference when giving an answer to somebody. And based on where you stand on those things, will guide how you give your answers. So it's important to study. Know what the other side point of view is. Now, some people don't think this is a good thing. Some people say you don't need to know what the other side's argument is. Just need to know the Bible. And I agree with that. I do. But on the other hand, I personally like to know where other people are coming from. When I came, I would say this. I was given the gospel in 2013. Prior to that, I thought I was saved, but I wasn't. I was very religious, but I was reading this Bible a lot. And one of the things that was going on in my mind at the time was, if Christianity is true, then what makes other ones false? All right. So this is before I would say, but I put myself in the other people's shoes. What makes Christianity true and the other ones false? And I began to read the scriptures, and I began to read other material. I mean, I've read through the Quran. I've read the New World Translation, which is Jehovah's Witness Bible. I've read a little bit of the Book of Mormon. I haven't read all of that yet. But as I began to read all these things, I mean, just logically, I was like, man, I mean, not just reading the material, but looking at how the Bible came to be the Bible, how the Quran came to be, how the New World Translation of the Scriptures came to be, the Book of Mormon. Think about the historicity of all these works, even Buddhism, how that came to be. Looking at all of this, the only thing that logically stands is the Bible. It's the scriptures. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Christian. This is something I realized prior to hearing the gospel. And I was like, man, this has to be the truth. You know, that doesn't make me saved for having that mental assent to that. I just know the Bible, something about the Bible is different than every other work that's dealing with religion. Has to be. So study. Know what you believe and why you believe it. All right. So that's how I go about answering objections. You know, I mean, somebody comes to me on the street, talks to me about slavery in the Bible. Those three things are coming out, and it's second nature. I'm starting with God. I'm staying on topic, and by God's grace, I would have studied enough to be able to know how to give an answer to this individual with meekness and respect, or gentleness and respect. Yeah. So I hope that encourages you. I hope that helps you. If it wasn't enough, if you have other ways that you use to answer objections to people, or you find it be helpful for people to know, leave it in the comments. You know, this is about helping each other. Maybe you have some ways that can help me out. You fine tune how I deal with objections. You know, this is the whole thing about Prescribed Truth being an apologetics ministry. We want to grow in defending the faith against this fallen world. So, I appreciate your time. Like, share, and subscribe this if you find it helpful. Check out more videos of Prescribed Truth. And remember, in a world full of errors, the only thing the doctor prescribes is truth. Blessings.